Hi everyone, this is Scott Weidenkibowitz, and I have a critique for you today. So this photographer sent in this photograph. This is the original. This is actually a JPEG, not a RAW file. So when I go through this edit, just remember that I can only push it so far because it is a JPEG. I am very limited to the dynamic range, how much I can recover in the highlights and shadows and things like that. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that you've got a lot more flexibility with the raw file. So this is the original JPEG version of this scene. This is actually what the photographer sent me, that their final post-processed image. And there's a little bit that I would change, but I'm going to show you what I would do differently compared to this final image. So from the original, the first thing I would do is to start up here and up in the basics. But before even I get to there, the first thing I notice is this is actually distracting me from the rest of the scene. The rocks down here, I feel like need to get out of here. So the first thing I would actually do is crop it. So I'm going to unlock the original aspect ratio. I'm actually going to sort of turn this into a panoramic type image. So it's not going to be a perfect panoramic dimensions, but to me, that is a lot better than the distortion or distraction you get from the rocks that were down here. The next thing I'm going to do is, you can see here it's actually clipping in the highlights big time in the histogram. So I'm going to bring the exposure down just enough so it's not clipping. You can see the sky is a lot better, and it's a little bit darker, yes, but that's okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start working on the highlights to make sure it's not clipping, and it was fine. Let's actually reset that. Bring down the shadows, because the shadows are fine if they're a little clippy. And still they're not quite there, and you can see it's starting to get very dark over here, so that's good. And then I'm going to look at the white. So I'm going to hold down the Alt Option key and get the whites where it's just a little bit of clipping, and then the blacks as well, and we'll see what that does. And right there. Now, here's the before. So here's the before, and here is the after. You can see already there's a big difference. There's a lot more contrast and pop to the image. You can see the clouds actually look awesome. So the next thing I'm actually going to do is bring out this brush, and I'm going to start brushing. I'm going to hit the O key so you can see the mask. I'm actually going to start brushing the sky. Start with as close to the mountains as possible. And I'm not going to be perfect with this because it's not my photograph, but I'm going to start brushing here. Just fill this in. Okay. Hide that mask. And now what I'm going to do is I actually want to bring up the clarity, because watch what happens when I bring up the clarity. The clouds are going to pop even more. We can bring the exposure down a little bit, bring down the highlights even more. Now look at those clouds, right? Those look awesome. So again, let me close the brush. Here's a before and here's an after. Looks cool. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the water down here, because we're actually seeing reflections of the clouds from the sky in the water. And this is a great example of how local adjustments can really help a photograph. Okay, let's hide that. And again, I'm going to bring down the exposure just a little. That's actually too much. So actually here I might not touch the exposure at all, but let's bring up the clarity. Definitely. And the highlights down a little bit. And close that. And again, here's a before and an after. Look how much those clouds pop. It's awesome. Okay. Now, the next thing I might do is go here and just bump up the tone curve a little bit, because the effect you get from the contrast of that is a lot different than the regular. So I'm actually going to zero out the regular contrast. And it might actually be too much. Let's actually reduce the shadows a little bit, or actually bring them back a little bit. So that's actually better. Yeah. Okay. Now, next thing I'm going to do is, let's say you want to brighten just a certain part of it. I'm going to go here and just brighten that up just a little bit. That's actually too much. I don't want to do that. So instead I'm going to go here and move on to the next part, which is I want to bring out the greens a little bit. So I'm going to use the luminance, saturation I mean, just saturate the greens a little bit more. Go to different parts of it because there's different shades of green all over this photograph. And then I might even do a little bit, I'm actually going to desaturate up here a little bit because it's actually a little too blue for my taste. Okay, so really there's not much I would do to this photograph. You can see already it's very different. So here's a before again, here's an after. The next thing I might do is I might actually go down to the lens correction, throw on the lens correction so that if it was a raw file, it would know what the lens was. It will take care of that. Level it if it needs it. I don't think it actually needs any leveling because everything's going different angles, so there's really nothing to level. And really that's about all I would do. I really love this image. It's a beautiful image. The only thing that was really distracting me were the rocks down here. So here, let me go to the before and after. Go to my version versus the photographer's version. You can see they're very different. The photographer's version is a little bit lighter. The greens are lighter. The sky doesn't pop as much. And that rock at the bottom right is just distracting for me. Now, there's nothing wrong with it. The photographer, made the photograph. The photographer chose what he or she wanted to photograph and made it happen, and it looks great. It's a beautiful scene. I would just have done it differently. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's just different eyes, different point of views, different perspectives, things like that. So that's this critique. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. But thank you for watching. Stay tuned for the next one.